With Gigantic now being an open beta and soon going into release, it's only natural to suspect a large incoming player base in the next couple months. Since Gigantic is so unique, being truly the only game type of its design, being combined from multiple aspects of MOBAs and other first-person shooters, a lot of these new players will be confused about game mechanics. And though the in-game tutorial and training videos give players a bunch of basic tools and ideas in the right direction, they can only teach you so much in a manageable amount of time that's both long enough to teach, but also not too long to either be a hassle or bore to the player. Hello everybody, this is Wolfman, better known as Wolfie from GG Unleashed, and this is 10 essential things the Gigantic tutorial doesn't teach you. Now keep in mind that these things will be in no general order, and most of them are not any more significant than the others, but all of them are things that all players in every skill cap should remember, whether you're brand new or you've been playing since alpha. Number 1. Sprinting, dodging, jumping, and using abilities consume stamina. For those that didn't know, there are two bars on the UI around your character in the center of the screen. One being a green bar which indicates your health, and the other being a blue bar which indicates your stamina. Stamina is by far the most important resource that you need to properly manage in Gigantic. Stamina is required for your hero to sprint and sprint jump as well as perform dodges. You can sprint by holding down your left shift key and pressing W to go forward, or W and A to strafe left and W and D to strafe right. Dodging is default keyed to your shift as well, and you can perform a dodge by quickly tapping shift while holding A, S, or D to dodge left, back, and right respectively. However, if you've consumed all of your stamina, you can't sprint or dodge, which leaves you far more susceptible to enemy attacks until you get at least part of your stamina bar back. Now, one thing that I've noticed from watching streams on the Gigantic channel is that players think that they've never felt like dodging is ever necessary, and that it's more of a waste of the stamina than any kind of benefit. Well, the important thing about dodges that newer players don't know about is that they include invulnerability frames. These iframes make your hero unable to be hit by most abilities in the game, which means they can only take damage or be affected by crowd control if it was already applied to them beforehand, like a burn or a bleed effect. It's important to keep in mind though that there are only a certain amount of iframes during the dodge animation, and every hero is unique. If you can pinpoint where your favorite hero has those iframes, you can dodge key abilities such as Margrave's Staggering Leap or Tripp's Electric Slide Kick. Another important thing to remember is, as said before, each hero's dodge animation is unique, and some dodges consume less stamina and can be performed more quickly. Heroes such as Taito and Tripp can dodge up to 7 times with a full stamina bar and recover really quickly, whereas someone like Margrave or Charnot can only dodge about 4 or 5 times, and they also don't travel as far of a distance and have a longer recovery animation. This is a really overlooked factor about hero strengths and weaknesses that does make a big difference. Dodging also removes your character's unit collision, meaning that you can go through other people in case you get pinned against a wall or find yourself in a situation where you can only move left, but you really need to go right. And this isn't just for enemies, it's for allies too. Dodging can get you on the other side of a bloomer to avoid an incoming skill shot, or through your allied Sven who seems to be taking up over half the doorway and for some reason just won't heal you or move. When it comes to ability usage, you should start keeping track of how much stamina you consume when using each ability. LMBs and RMBs usually don't consume too much, however a fair amount of the time your E abilities or any ability that's used to relocate yourself can consume a lot of stamina. This doesn't mean that you're effectively silenced if you run out of stamina as if it were the equivalent of a mana bar or something, but it's important to know how much you're consuming so you can better manage it in the future, and tie in things like sprinting and dodging later. Number 2. Health and stamina only regenerate while not in combat. Your health and stamina will never regenerate if you stay in combat or keep using your abilities. Health can only be regained by receiving healing from a friendly ally, or if you stay out of combat for more than 5 seconds by not taking any damage or using an ability, or 3 seconds if your hero has access to the skirmishing talent. Stamina will continue to regenerate slowly if you're still taking damage, but it will regenerate faster over time so long as you're not consuming it by sprinting or jumping as well. What this means altogether is that even if you're in the safest location away from all the fighting and nobody knows where you are, if you're simply holding down your LMB and attacking, you will not regenerate your resources because the game believes that you're still in combat. A good way to determine whether or not you're in combat is if your health and stamina bars are bright or faded. If your bars are a very full and rich green and blue color, then you're in combat. When you see them fade and half disappear into the background, then you're out of combat. The very second you use an ability or take damage, then you're in combat again and your health will stop regenerating. You can also determine it based on how much stamina you consume by sprinting or jumping. While not in combat, sprinting and jumping will cost very little stamina, whereas these actions can consume up to 4 times or more stamina over the same amount of time while you're in combat. This is a good thing to remember if you're playing a hero who can apply a lot of damage over time effects. If your target has retreated but you can still see damage numbers behind the walls, you know that they're still in combat and likely not to return to the fight for a while unless they have a healer because they're not getting health back. Number 3. Every black tick on a health bar equals 500 health. While looking at enemy health bars, you may have noticed that they're segmented into parts by narrow black ticks. Each of these ticks represent 500 health. Remembering this helps you figure out who is squishiest on their team so that you can start prioritizing that target. Generally, a hero who has a low amount of total health is usually a counter compensation for how much damage and or utility they can provide to a team, such as Trip, Mozu, or Amani. However, this isn't always the case with heroes such as HK2 or 6 or Vidasi, who can both provide a great amount of teamfight power and also obscurely tanky in their own way based on how they build. Regardless, if you see an enemy below that final tick, you should try to find a way to communicate to your damage dealers that they're vulnerable. You and your team should try and do everything you can to catch up priority targets and burst them down as quickly as possible. Because remember that kills doesn't just give your guardian power, but also gives your team a numbers advantage, and you can swing a fight in your favor that way. Even if you don't secure a kill, getting an enemy low and forcing them to waste cooldowns is also a win. Positioning and awareness are also very important. Be sure to not get caught out yourself, or you're just being a deficit to your allies. The Guardians also have these health ticks, but they're at 1000 health apiece instead of 500. If you think a Guardian's health looks intimidating, look to see if you can see the health marker and make your judgment based on that. Constantly be aware of how much damage your hero can do, as it might be the key difference between a victory and defeat. Number 4. Consecutive allied deaths increase the respawn timer. Motika has always had this belief that Victory in Gigantic involves heavy team coordination, and that's very true. They promote that partially by having teams respawn together if there are multiple deaths so that no one is charging in all by themselves. And though that's a good thing, it's also a bad thing because it means that if your allies die in quick succession, then you're at a far longer disadvantage until your team can regroup and recover. Though it sounds like a coward's tactic, if you see a fight going poorly, it's always safer to run instead of giving up more power to the enemy guardian. In the early game, each death adds about 3 to 5 more seconds to the respawn timer. However, during the clash, a second death can add up to about 10 seconds to the respawn timer if it's a long game. It's also important to know that if you become the last man alive, you need to do anything and everything you can to stay alive until your team respawns, because if you die it can add up to around 15 more seconds to the remaining time. And before you know it, you have over 30 seconds of waiting, which gives the enemy team plenty of chance to attack and kill 1 or maybe even 2 of your creatures. There is almost never a time where giving up more than 2 kills to the enemy team is ever worth anything. You should always play to stay alive. Number 5. Kills and deaths during Guardian Rampage does not give power towards the next push. While your Guardian is attacking and has the other Guardian vulnerable, you don't need to feel as though dying is the worst possible thing to happen. Remember that the wounds are the single most important objective in the game and need to be accomplished by any means necessary if you want to win. Any and all damage inflicted to the Guardian is good. If you see the Guardian's health bar low and it's still vulnerable, do what you can to hit it, even if it's a simple 2 or 3 attacks. The worst that could happen upon your death is that you give the enemy Guardian a slightly stronger defense shield. But this doesn't mean that everyone on your team should stack up in the same spot and attack the wound all together. You need to find the sweet spot between pushing together and staggering for the most effectiveness, where you're far enough to not get melted by AoE effects, but also close enough to cover each other in case things start getting rough. As I said in the last tip, consecutive deaths increase the respawn timer. Someone should try and stay in the back or the side to be the one that either gets the last chunk of wound health or be the one that escapes in case the others die, because the last thing that you want is a team wipe. On the opposite side of the spectrum, if you know that you're going to lose a push, you don't need to immediately turn and run to defend your Guardian either. Keep fighting where you are and try to delay the enemy team as long as you can. If you can mitigate and distract their damage, wait until the second your Guardian recovers and then turn on kill mode, because it instantly becomes a new race for power. 2 reckless enemies going for a hopeless wound turns into 20 power for your Guardian. And this also applies to creatures. You don't need to kill a creature during a push because it accomplishes very little. Wait until the Guardian has recovered and then kill the creature and you've gotten instant 20 power. Number 6. Guardians deal damage and can auto wound on a rampage. If your Guardian gets an attack, it will always deal some amount of damage to the enemy Guardian when it becomes vulnerable, varying depending on the shield is low or high. The exception to this is if the enemy Guardian has 100 shield, in which case your Guardian will not deal any damage. This is why it's important for the defending team to try and gain power during the small period of time that the enemy Guardian is advancing. If you get a full shield, then the initial attack will not deal any damage, and you'll have to force the enemy team to move in for the attack. Even if you don't get a full shield, any amount of mitigation is beneficial to a good defense. On the contrary, if an enemy Guardian has both low health and a low shield, there's a very good chance that your Guardian's attack will deal enough damage to automatically deliver the first or second wound. Notice that I said the first or second and not the final wound. This is important because your Guardian cannot finish the game for you. No matter how many times you get a push during the clash, someone on your team has to go in and deliver the final blow to win the game. There have been several times in games where I've noticed that people will go back and try to finish wounds when a Guardian will do it automatically, and this puts them in a very bad situation because now they're far behind enemy lines with no support, and they're most likely to die and give power unless they somehow go unnoticed. A good rule of thumb when it comes to determining if the push will be an auto wound or not is to look at the bars as if they were percentages. For example, if the Guardian has about 30% life left in the current wound and has a less than 70% shield, chances are that the Guardian will do enough damage to finish the wound on its own. Contrarily, if the Guardian still has about 60% of its health left and has a 90% shield, the initial Guardian damage will generally be a lot weaker. Granted that this isn't always the case considering that the amount of damage the Guardians do later in the game is increased dramatically, but it's something to keep a close eye on. Number 7. Minimap icons tell you everything. When you look at your minimap during a match, you can see all power capture points and what creatures currently occupying them. Cyclops is marked by walls, Cerberuses are eyeballs, Bloomas are plus signs, and Drakes are flames. You can also see that they're color coordinated with green for friendly units and red for enemy units. If you look on your map and see a simple green circle on one of your capture points, then that means that the point is bare and you need to summon a creature there. And though people can argue that some creatures are better on some points than others, what's most important is that you have a creature there so that it can capture the orbs that spawn on that point. The minimap also tells you which of your creatures have been upgraded into adults, that's indicated by a white circle surrounding the icon. If there's anything video games have taught us over the years, it's that when there's a flashing red light somewhere on the screen, then it usually indicates that something is wrong. If one of your creatures engages in combat, the icon where that creature is located will begin flashing rapidly. This could mean that someone is simply walking by, or that multiple enemy heroes are currently attacking that creature and it needs to be defended. If you've ever played any kind of MOBA, or any kind of game with a minimap for that matter, you know that map awareness is crucial. Your team needs to be able to have coverage of the map so that you can quickly respond to creatures being assaulted. Another important thing is to listen to audio cues from your Guardian. Both Laren and Gren will say, "Our creature is under attack" when a friendly creature enters combat. Look for the flashing light and coordinate to defend. Guardians will also say the line, "Our creature is in danger," and this means that your creature has fallen under 30% of its total health and needs to be saved immediately. If you see a flashing red light on the enemy side of the map, that means that there's a creature currently being summoned there. This gives you a chance to try and go assault a different point while the enemy attempts to summon, because remember that creatures summon faster with more allies present in the circle. There's a chance that the enemy team is trying to stack a point to get a creature up quickly, which means that they're not defending another creature on a point further away. Constantly be glancing at your map and see what's going on during a game. Number 8. Adult creatures capture orbs faster than babies. If you notice that your team seems to be having trouble getting pushes when the power score is currently even, look to see if the enemy has any adult creatures on the parallel point. Remember how in the last tip I said that you can tell if there's an adult creature on a point by a solid white line around the icon? Adult creatures are not only more powerful, but they capture orbs faster as well, 3 times the speed of a baby creature and 12 times the speed of a player. This can make a huge difference because if both teams currently have 80 power and your team has an adult creature while theirs is still a baby, you're guaranteed to get the push because your adult will capture first. One thing that's important to remember though is that creatures cannot capture orbs while they're still summoning. If an orb is about to spawn on that point, it's usually best to wait until the orb is captured to optimize your power gain. Also, you should constantly be aware of what the enemy team is currently doing. You don't want to go all the way back to your A point to get that critical adult bloomer while the enemy team is assaulting B or C point. You're leaving behind your team and giving the enemy a numbers advantage, and if they lose, chances are the enemy will take the creature on that point where your team died, and they also have a chance to come up to where you're upgrading and kill you and your creature before it even finishes summoning. Number 9. Orb capture can be disrupted by damage. Although it makes the most sense to disrupt an enemy creature or hero from capturing by doing some kind of hard crowd control, it's worth noting that you can disrupt a capture by dealing a certain amount of damage to the channeling enemy, and they'll be forced out of their capture. At the time that this video is released, the damage threshold for stopping a capture is 500 damage to whomever is channeling, which in all honesty isn't difficult even by just one person. This is important to remember because players should be aware that they can disrupt enemies even if their hero lacks hard crowd control. The current crowd controls that can stop an orb capture are push, pull, launch, daze, interrupt, and stun. And though there's a lot of different CCs there, not every hero has access to them, and even the ones that do sometimes don't have them on a consistent enough basis to be constantly disrupting, such as Margrave's Leap or Ashland's Warcry. You shouldn't be discouraged to try and apply pressure to enemies with just damage, because you'll either force them away from the capture, or you'll kill them and gain power. Either way, you'll have higher power in the end. Number 10. Track stealth with damage over time effects. Stealth mechanics have always been something tricky to do within any game. You want them to be good enough to conceal your character to sneak around unnoticed as intended, but you also want it to not be strong enough so that there's no ability to counterplay. In Gigantic, Trip is the hero who uses stealth most often, lasting 6 seconds with a 20-second cooldown and giving her an effective 30% stealth uptime at default. Not to mention that her stealth gives her no hindrances either, as opposed to Voden who can't sprint while in stealth and only lasts 5 seconds on a 20-second cooldown, and Amani who only gains stealth while in her smokescreen area and on a 13-second cooldown. Granted, Amani's smokescreen can effectively stealth her entire team, but it still doesn't compare to the amount of power and openness Trip's stealth provides. But regardless of whoever's stealth mechanic you're currently dealing with, people need to realize that these characters are simply invisible and not invincible. Any damage you've already applied, like a bleed or burn, still shows damage numbers when the enemy takes damage, and you can use that to track which direction they're moving. This means that if you have an attack that swings in front of you or is projectile based, which is literally everyone except Vidasi and Grizoma unless you take specific talents, you can still hit the target and they'll still take damage. Also, when an enemy is stealth, they're still affected by unit collision, meaning that if for some reason you can't move around or through something and you know an enemy just stealthed, there's a good chance that they're right in front of you, so you might as well just try and attack and see what happens. You've literally got nothing to lose. For a more competitive method of finding stealth targets, you should start trying to spot the faint shimmer effect of a stealth enemy, which is a similar feel to the stealth mechanic Blizzard uses in their StarCraft and Heroes of the Storm games. It's very subtle, but once you spot it the first time, it becomes a lot easier afterwards. And that's going to wrap up this video. It was a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I hope that these tips will help make your gameplay a lot more enjoyable and less confusing. If you did enjoy, please leave a thumbs up, because that's really going to help in the future for what kind of videos you guys want me to make. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and visit ggunleashed.com for upcoming videos, articles, and all sorts of things. A big shout out to all the ones who sent me some of the gameplay footage. You guys are fantastic. And of course to Motika for creating this amazing game that I really hope blows up into something big in the future. It's been a long wait, but open beta is finally here and everyone's so excited. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you guys on the airship.